So what is an IP address? IP stands for Internet Protocol. The best analogy I can give you for explaining what an IP address is by thinking about sending a physical letter to someone. Just as every physical location requires an address. Just as you'd put on a letter, you'd put the name of the house, or the number, you put the village or town, put the province or state, and you put your country, and that's just like an IP address. So basically, the IP address is used to identify where it needs to be, just like the address on an envelope. It's the digital equivalent of an address. Every device in your house requires an IP address. Every single one. And the most common IP address is 192.168.1.xx. XX being any number that the router would assign to that device from 1 to 254. So why do we need IP addresses? Well, it's to identify each device. And the router decides what device gets what IP address by something called DHCP, which will automatically assign the device an IP address. Let me give you an example. So your phone, TV, computer, Kindle, even watches and smart hubs all require an IP address. You've got a TV and the IP address on that TV is 192.168.1.2. For your computer, the IP address is 192.168.1.3. And then your Kindle will have the same, and at the end it'll be a 4, and your smart hub would maybe a 5. So therefore, the router has distributed those IP addresses where each IP address is assigned with a different number. And obviously the numbers cannot be the same, otherwise it wouldn't know where to go, like having 2 addresses that would be the same. It just doesn't work. So here's a question. Do we have enough IP addresses? And the answer is no, we don't. No, we don't have enough IP addresses. In fact, the amount we have is 4,294,967,296. That's how many IP addresses we have in the world, which is clearly not enough. So what's the answer? We already have an answer, and the answer is IPv6, and that looks like this. It's very long, and this IP address will give us 340 trillion or undecillion IP addresses. So, unfortunately, IPv6 does have its issues. Adopting IPv6 is actually very difficult, and the reasons are DNS issues, high cost, and IPv flooding, to name but a few. I won't go into these issues here, but they are hurdles that we need to overcome before we can adopt IPv6. But it's not to say nobody's adopting IPv6. In fact, some ISPs have adopted IPv6, and some businesses have. So, what's the answer? Here's the conclusion. What do we use now? We use IPv4 and IPv6 together, and that is how we'll be moving forward short term, and hopefully we will be able to adopt IPv6 in the near future.